Yeah, I felt really good leading into the Ironman at Cairns. It was kind of a different lead up for me in terms of, kind of a different challenge, I guess. So it was almost an unknown. And surprisingly, I was quite relaxed going in. I thought it would be the opposite because I do tend to get quite nervous, especially for before 70.3s. And 70.3s I can do well at. I get really nervous. But for the Ironman, it was kind of like a different feeling, more excitement because it was an unknown and it was a challenge. And I was kind of, sounds a bit cheesy, but I was racing myself almost. I wasn't worrying about other people, where they were, what times they were doing and things like that. It was all kind of an internal race against myself, which was kind of an exciting and different feeling I've had leading into a race. Yeah, my lowest moment in the Ironman probably came in the last probably 30 minutes of the race, maybe a little bit longer, 40 minutes, kind of the last 10K or so. I think it was just, the end of an Ironman. It bites, that's for sure. And I think, how I dealt with it, this might not be the answer you want to hear, but I just had to get to the finish line, and then, but I think it was almost, I was looking back on it the other day, in that last kind of 6 kilometres, I don't really remember too much about it. And I think that was definitely kind of one of those moments where it was just willpower, one foot in front of the other, trying to get to that finish line. And it's almost becomes like a survival. But up until that point, it was actually feeling quite within myself, the Ironman. And then it kind of turns pretty quickly. It goes from being, pretty good to not so good pretty quickly. Yeah, I think I grew up watching guys like Craig Alexander and winning Kona, and so that was always a race that I was aware of, and always something that I'd always kind of looked at and thought, I'd like to be there one day. And then I kind of followed the ITU path for a little bit, and I thought, chase the kind of Olympic cycle and things like that. And I thought that's perhaps where my triathlon career was going to lead me, but then for reasons, I went into long course racing. And I think when I'm looking back, it was always Kona. It was always something that I wanted to do. And especially where I grew up, we had a pretty prominent triathlon club in Australia, Panthers Tri Club, and we had some pretty competitive age groupers that would always go to Kona, and I would love training with those guys and hearing the stories and things. So I always, absorbed a lot of their energy and their excitement around Kona. And I think having that and training with those guys really kind of boosted my attitude towards Kona as well. I think a few years ago you could get away with kind of a blanket training program for 70.3 and Ironman, but as the sport's evolved and people are raising the bar, I don't think it's as easy now. You kind of have to specialise. So, there's definitely 70.3 training, and then there's definitely Ironman training. And the last few years, my focus has been on 70.3 and kind of having that speed and that top end, and shifting towards Ironman. We knew we could back off a little bit of that kind of top end and focus more in that zone 2, zone 3, and just building muscle resilience, really. It's an Ironman, the marathon running. If you can run 4-minute Ks, it's a 2:48 run. It's not fast, but you need a lot of muscle resilience, and 4-minute Ks becomes very hard at the back end of a marathon. So a lot of my training was kind of focused more on that muscle resilience and just building the engine, really. But obviously you don't want to completely neglect that top end either, because you do still need that, and it does still play an important role in Ironman and the Ironman training as well. So it's a delicate balance, but I think doing a mix of both is really important. I would do a pretty solid brick session every Saturday in my build-up, and that kind of progressed up until I think it was a 4-hour ride and then a 24-kilometre run off. And that 4-hour ride might have had 2.5 hours worth of kind of intervals at Ironman or above, and then getting off and running 24 kilometres kind of at goal Ironman pace. So that's a brick session, but then I would also do some longer runs up to 30 kilometres, kind of just as a long run, not with a bike before it. Or, you might do some longer rides up over 6 hours, getting up 180 to 200 kilometers on the bike, and maybe doing a shorter run off, because obviously you're not going to do a huge brick session off a 6-hour bike ride and things like that. Well, at least not for me, because we found that for me, I don't really respond to the big, 35-hour weeks. I'm kind of more in that mid to high 20s on a big week. So we kind of need to be careful with not overloading too much, because I do feel that, over 30 hours I can get a little bit fatigued, and you're not getting those, it's diminishing returns almost. Yeah, so working with Precision Fuel and Hydration, know that I've got some room to improve my carb intake on the run, especially, and I think in a 70.3 or middle distance race, you can get away with front loading on the bike and taking in a little bit less on the run, because the run's only 70 minutes or so, give or take. So you can get through that, but obviously a marathon in an Ironman being a lot longer, you can't front load. You can't have any deficiencies. So for me, I've really had to work on consuming more on the run, and that's something that I'm still kind of learning, because I find it quite difficult to consume on the run carbohydrates. But I practice on all those brick sessions that I was talking about. I take in race nutrition as I would in a race, and just practice it during racing and things like that. And with the new Precision and Fuel and Hydration, they've carb powder, which the viscosity is going to be a lot lower than gels, so I'm going to be able to tolerate that better on the run. In Ironman cans for the bike, I used the PF30 carbohydrate gels, and I had 2 of the 100 milligram caffeine gels as well. So all my nutrition was strictly the gels. I had them in my bottle, and I took a gel every 20 minutes, so that works out to 90 grams of carbohydrate now, but I actually took in a little bit more in that last hour to bump it up closer to 100 grams. And then on the run, I was using the gels as well, and the electrolyte mixed into a hand flask with some water to make it a little bit easier to stomach. Yeah, training the gut in training sessions is very important, because I think we're burning a lot more than perhaps we realize in a race, and you might think that you're consuming enough, but chances are you might be on the lower end. So trying to minimize those losses is extremely important, and especially in something like an Ironman, you're never going to replenish everything that you're losing. So you're almost, trying to limit the losses as much as possible. So training the gut is very important, and I for sure noticed it in training some of those longer runs. I'd have my wife riding next to me or driving out with my gels and my hydration as well, and I'd be running past her and grabbing it and consuming it and things like that, because it definitely does work, and it's important to train the gut for sure. So I have a plan, kind of an outline that I try and follow and adjust as needed, kind of on the fly, or if I know if it's going to be a hotter race or a cooler race. I think I can't remember off the top of my head the numbers that I hit. But I use the effervescent tablets and make sure I'm hitting my needs, and then once what I've got on board has been consumed, I take on water, and then the Precision Fuel and Hydration salt capsules as my electrolyte, and then I carry pretty much everything with me, so all I need to do is grab water at the aid stations, and that gets me through the whole bike, because I don't want to be taking on board something that I haven't used in training or things like that could potentially cause some GI distress. So usually with 70.3s, I'm looking at all my competitors and looking at their strengths, looking at their weaknesses, and I've got to ride with these people because this is my ticket to a good race and things like that. You are being quite reactive or making your own moves and trying to exploit other people's strengths and weaknesses. But for the Ironman, it was completely the opposite thing, and I think that's what was so exciting for me and made it so different, and maybe I wasn't so nervous because I wasn't worrying about what other people were doing. It was kind of all an internal thing, and it was what was going to get me from the start to the finish the fastest. And I knew what numbers I could ride. I knew what I needed to run, and I raced guys like Braden Curry, who's a notoriously takes off on the run like he's running a 10K. And I knew that was going to happen, and he took off, and I didn't even worry. I was just like, all right, I'm going to stick to my pace. I was trying to run 350 to 4-minute Ks, and I think I lost 2 to 3 minutes in that first 10K, but I didn't care because I knew that to get to the finish of the run the fastest, I needed to hold this pace for as long as I can. So that kind of aspect of Ironman was something different, something that I wasn't perhaps used to, but I really enjoyed, and having that kind of racing against yourself, which does sound a little bit cheesy and cliche, but that's what it was. Yeah, so recovery generally is something that I take pretty seriously. I find mentally as well, it might be nice to take a few days away and kind of not worry about training and things like that. But yeah, I think recovery is very important, and sometimes it can take me up to a week to fully recover from a hard 70.3, and I've had times where I haven't been able to run for up to 6 days after the race, and I'm still sore going up and down stairs. And with the Ironman, it was a little bit different than I expected. I was sore, but it was similar soreness to how I felt after some 70.3s, but I think it was there was just a lot of fatigue, I think, tiredness that wasn't related to the muscle soreness, more like sleeping a lot and going out and training and having a bit of low energy and things like that. So that took a little bit longer than I expected, definitely a lot longer than a 70.3, but I don't think there's a time frame, a one size fits all. I think you have to listen to your body, and I still do that. If I do a 70.3 and I feel good 2 or 3 days later, I might be out training. But if I'm still feeling sore and tired and things, I've got no problem taking, 7 to 10 days quite easy. Know kind of what your limits are. It can be a long day, and you don't want to be out there burning all your matches in that first half of the bike, and if it feels easy, that's great. You want it to feel as easy as possible, because there's going to be a time where it doesn't feel easy, and you're going to wish you went easier when you should have been. So that's my one piece of advice.